On the happiest day of my daughter's life, a janitor gripped my arm so tightly her fingers trembled. "Sir, if you care about staying alive, you need to hide. Right now." I almost pulled away. It sounded absurd, paranoid. But then I looked into her eyes and saw real fear. "Please," she whispered. "Just trust me." She led me behind the reception hall into a shadowed corner no guest would ever notice. 10 minutes later, I overheard a conversation that made the blood drain from my face. That's when I realized something horrifying. This wasn't a wedding celebration. It was a carefully designed trap. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you for being here with me. If this story has already caught your attention, take a second to leave a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your part of the world right now? I always read them, and it truly means more than you know. And one important note before we continue: while this story is rooted in deep emotions and meaningful lessons, certain details have been shaped for storytelling purposes to protect privacy and highlight the message behind it. Now, let's continue. I woke up that Saturday the same way I had woken up every morning for the past 5 years, alone in a bed meant for two. The space beside me was untouched, the pillow still indented in the shape it had held for decades. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows of the Kensington Estate's master bedroom, stretching across the empty linen like a quiet reminder. Penelope sighed. For the first year after she passed, I used to reach for her in those soft, half-conscious seconds between sleep and memory. Now I didn't reach anymore. I simply stared at the ceiling and let the silence settle into my chest. 5 years. 5 years since cancer had taken her from us. 5 years of learning how to function without the woman who had been my compass, my conscience, and the warmth in this house. But that morning wasn't about grief. It was about Julianne. I pushed back the covers and walked to the window. The estate grounds spread out below rolling lawns, trimmed to perfection, white tent canopies, rising like sails for the reception rows of ivory chairs, aligned in flawless symmetry. Florists moved briskly between arrangements. Caterers unloaded silver trays. Everything looked immaculate. Everything looked ready. Penelope would have loved this. She would have been up before dawn, barefoot on the marble floors, issuing gentle but firm instructions. She would have cried into her coffee while pretending she wasn't crying. She would have held Julianne's hands and reminded her to breathe. She would have told her she was radiant, that she deserved happiness. Instead, it was just me. Standing at that window, I made myself a quiet promise. I'll protect her the way you would have wanted me to. I didn't know then how heavy that promise would become. By 10 o'clock, the house had transformed. The east wing echoed with laughter and the pop of champagne corks. Julianne's bridesmaids filled the hallways with perfume and nervous excitement. Their voices carried downstairs, bright, carefree, alive. It struck me then that my daughter was no longer the little girl who used to beg me for piggyback rides. She was 29, a woman, about to become someone's wife. Gavin Ellington's wife. The name lodged in my throat. I brushed the thought aside and climbed the stairs. When I knocked on her door, the laughter dimmed. "Come in, Dad." I stepped inside and time stopped. Julianne stood before a tall mirror bathed in morning light. Her wedding dress cascaded in layers of ivory lace and silk, shimmering with each subtle movement. Her hair was pinned elegantly at the back of her head, soft curls framing her face. When she turned to me, her eyes glistened. "Dad," she whispered. "What do you think?" For a moment I couldn't answer. I saw her at 5 years old, standing on my shoes while we danced in the living room. I saw her at 16, crying over her first heartbreak, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I saw her at 22, calling me from college just to say she missed home. And now she stood before me in white. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," I said. Finally, my voice thick. "Your mother would be so proud." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tightly, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume, wishing I could freeze the moment in place. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart." I kissed the top of her head and stepped back before my composure broke. "Let's get you married." St. Mary's Cathedral rose like something out of a painting. Arched ceilings, stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the pews. 200 guests filled the space, their whispers swelling into silence as the organ began. We walked down the aisle together. I felt every pair of eyes on us, but I only saw him. Gavin stood at the altar in a tailored black tuxedo posture, straight expression polished. He watched Julianne approach with what looked like pure admiration. He was handsome, articulate, successful, the kind of man other fathers would envy. So why did something inside me tighten? A faint, persistent tug. Not loud enough to name, just enough to feel. Stop it, I told myself. Every father feels this. At the altar, Father Christopher Bennett smiled warmly. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? I looked at Julianne one last time. She was glowing. I do. I placed her hand in Gavin's and stepped back. And just like that, my daughter became someone else's responsibility. The ceremony blurred. Vows exchanged. Rings slipped onto fingers. A kiss beneath the cathedral lights. Applause filling the air. I clapped and smiled the way I was supposed to, pride and loss warring quietly inside me. The reception at the waterfront venue was flawless. Crystal string lights hung like constellations overhead. White linen tables shimmered with gold accents. A live jazz band played softly as laughter and conversation filled the room. Julianne and Gavin moved effortlessly through the crowd, accepting congratulations, radiating confidence. They looked perfect. I watched them take the floor for their first dance. The music slowed. Gavin pulled Julianne close. She rested her head against his shoulder, and he whispered something that made her laugh. The room hushed, mesmerized. For a moment the unease loosened. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe everything is going to be fine. James Cooper appeared beside me holding 2 glasses of bourbon. She looks happy, he said. She does. You did good, Peter. I nodded, but the unease hadn't disappeared. It lingered small and sharp, like a pebble lodged inside my shoe. James raised his glass. To Julianne. To Julianne. We drank. An hour later, I slipped away to the rooftop terrace. I needed air. The city lights shimmered below, distant and calm. The hum of the party faded behind me as I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. You're overthinking this, Mr. Kensington. I turned. A woman stood a few steps away, dressed in the venue's cleaning uniform. Middle-aged, hair pulled back, a spray bottle and cloth in her hands. I recognized her faintly from earlier, moving silently between tables unnoticed. Can I help you? I asked. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping closer. Mr. Kensington? She repeated, her voice low but urgent. I need you to trust me. Right now. My chest tightened. What is this about? Her eyes didn't waver. It's about your daughter and the man she just married. My stomach dropped. What are you saying? I don't have much time, she whispered. But I overheard something tonight. Something you need to hear. My pulse began to pound in my ears. Who are you? My name is Diana Foster, she said steadily. And if you care about your daughter, you'll listen to me. Before I could press her for details, Diana's fingers closed around my wrist. We don't have time, she said, her voice low but sharp with urgency. You need to come with me. Now. Diana, what is this? I demanded, instinctively pulling back. Please, Mr. Kensington. Her grip tightened. If you want to understand what's happening tonight, you have to trust me. There was something in her eyes, something steady and terrified at the same time, that cut through my skepticism. It wasn't hysteria. It wasn't gossip. It was conviction. Against my better judgment, I followed. She moved quickly through the rooftop exit and into a narrow back stairwell I hadn't even noticed before. The festive music from the reception, laughter clinking glasses, the hum of celebration faded with every step we descended. In its place came the dull thrum of industrial air vents and the metallic rattle of kitchen staff working below. We emerged into a dim service corridor lined with gray metal doors, stacked crates, and rolling racks draped in white linens. This way, she whispered. She pulled open a small storage room and ushered me inside. The space was cramped, mops, cleaning carts, folded banquet chairs leaning precariously against the walls. The door shut with a soft click, sealing us in near darkness. "Stay quiet," she breathed. "Don't make a sound." My heart was already pounding hard enough to echo in my ears. "What the hell is this about?" I hissed. "Just wait." She cracked the door open a fraction and peered through. I stood frozen behind her, mind racing. Was this some absurd misunderstanding, a jealous employee spreading rumors? Was I really hiding in a janitor's closet at my daughter's wedding reception? Then I heard it. "Can't believe you actually pulled that off." A woman's voice. Young, familiar. "Vanessa!" The air left my lungs. Julianne's maid of honor. My niece. My brother's daughter. The girl who had grown up running through the halls of my home every summer. "It wasn't that hard," a man replied smoothly. "Gavin." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Diana glanced back at me, her face pale in the dim light. She pressed a finger to her lips. Through the narrow crack in the door, I could see them clearly now. They were standing in the hallway just outside, close. Too close. Gavin's hand rested casually at Vanessa's waist. Her body leaned into his as if it belonged there. There was nothing accidental about it. It wasn't familial. It wasn't innocent. It was intimate. My niece. My brother's little girl. The same child who once begged me to push her higher on the swings at the park. The same child who used to call me Uncle Peter with that wide, trusting smile. And now she stood in a shadowed corridor with my daughter's brand new husband, pressed against him, like they'd been lovers for years. "You're sure about this?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Once this is done, there's no going back." "It'll be fine," Gavin cut in calmly. "We've already talked about this." "I know, but it's a lot of money, Gavin. $10 million in life insurance alone." The words hit me like a physical blow. $10 million. Life insurance. My chest tightened painfully. "Trust me," Gavin said, his tone low and confident. "The old man doesn't suspect a thing. He's too busy playing proud father tonight. And once everything's locked in place..." "What about Julianne?" Vanessa asked. There was a pause, a long, suffocating pause. My heart hammered in my throat. "She's useful," Gavin said at last. "For now." Vanessa gave a soft laugh. There was no warmth in it. "You're terrible." "I'm practical. And when she's not useful anymore, then we'll deal with it." The words echoed in my skull. Deal with it. As if my daughter were a minor inconvenience. As if her life were a problem to be solved. Gavin leaned forward and pressed a slow kiss to Vanessa's forehead. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was tender, familiar, rehearsed. Like they had done it 100 times before. Like she wasn't my niece. Like Julianne wasn't her cousin. "Relax," he murmured. "Everything's going exactly according to plan. 6 months. Maybe less. Then we're set for life." "Promise?" Vanessa asked. "Promise." She stepped back, smoothing down the pale blue bridesmaid dress Julianne had helped her choose 3 months earlier. I remembered how excited Vanessa had been, twirling in front of mirrors, laughing with Julianne. "I should get back before anyone notices," she said. "Go ahead, I'll follow." She kissed him once more, brief, deliberate, then walked away, her heels clicking against the tile until the sound disappeared. Gavin remained alone in the hallway. He adjusted his tie in a decorative mirror mounted to the wall. He studied his reflection with a satisfied smile, the same polished, charming smile he'd worn at the altar earlier. Then he turned and walked away, whistling softly. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air felt thick, heavy, hard to breathe. Diana gently closed the storage door and turned toward me. "Now do you believe me?" she whispered. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. $10 million. She's useful, for now. 6 months. Vanessa. Family. Mr. Kensington, Diana asked carefully. "Are you okay?" "No," I managed hoarsely. "No, I'm not." She stepped closer. "I'm sorry you had to hear it that way. But you deserved the truth." "How long?" I asked, forcing the words out. "How long have you known something was wrong?" "I've worked here 10 years, she said quietly. "People forget we're around. They don't notice staff. I've been watching them all evening. The way he looks at her when no one's watching. The way they disappear at the same time. I've seen men like him before, Mr. Kensington." Her jaw tightened. They're predators. I leaned back against the wall because my legs no longer felt steady. Vanessa, I whispered. She's my niece, my brother's child. I taught her how to throw a baseball. I took her to her first concert. I know. She spent every holiday at our house. She and Julianne shared everything, secrets, clothes, dreams. They were inseparable. And now she's made a choice, Diana said gently. A terrible one. But not your choice. Julianne. I breathed, my voice cracking. My daughter. She doesn't know, Diana said firmly. I'm certain. If she did, she wouldn't have stood at that altar. She married him, I said. She stood in front of 200 people and said vows. And Vanessa stood right beside her, smiling, holding her bouquet. The weight of it crushed my chest. Diana reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small card. She pressed it into my shaking hand. My number, she said. If you need a witness, a statement, anything, I'll tell the truth. I stared at the card, barely seeing it. Why, I asked. You don't even know us. Her expression softened. Because I have a daughter, she said quietly. And if someone knew she was in danger, I'd pray they would speak up. I slipped the card into my jacket pocket. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, she replied. Be careful. Men like him don't back down easily. And if your niece is part of this, I understand, I said. It means this wasn't impulsive. No, she said softly. It means it was planned. She cracked the door open again and checked the hallway. It's clear. Go back upstairs. Act normal. Smile. Don't let him know you heard anything. And then I asked. She met my eyes steadily. Then you figure out how to protect your daughter. She slipped out into the corridor, leaving me alone in the dark storage room. For a long moment I stood there listening. Upstairs the band was playing. Guests were laughing. Glasses were clinking in celebration. 10 minutes earlier, I had been raising a toast to my daughter's future. Now I stood surrounded by cleaning supplies, trying to comprehend the reality that my son-in-law had just discussed her death like a business transaction. And my own niece had stood beside him. I had no recording, no proof, just words overheard in the shadows. If I stormed back into that ballroom and accused him, no one would believe me. Julianne wouldn't believe me. Gavin would deny everything. Vanessa would stand by his side and call me delusional. I would lose my daughter forever. No, I couldn't react. I had to think. I stepped back into the corridor and made my way upstairs, forcing my breathing to slow my expression to neutralize. When I re-entered the reception hall, the room was glowing with warmth and celebration. Julianne was laughing near the dance floor, her hand resting lightly on Gavin's arm. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear. She smiled. I stood there watching them, the applause, the music, the joy, and all I could see were the shadows underneath it. 10 minutes had changed everything, and somehow, without proof and without warning, I was going to have to save my daughter from the two people she trusted most. Before I could ask another question, Diana seized my wrist. We don't have time, she whispered, urgency tightening every syllable. You have to come with me. Now. Diana, slow down, what's going on? I tried to pull free, but she held firm. Please, Mr. Kensington. Her eyes locked onto mine. If you care about your daughter, you need to trust me. There was no panic in her expression, only a fierce certainty that cut through my irritation. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't drama. It was something far more serious. Against instinct and pride, I followed her. She moved quickly through a rooftop access door and into a narrow stairwell hidden behind a maintenance panel I had never noticed. With each step downward, the music from the reception softened the laughter. The clink of champagne glasses, the band's warm melody fading into distant echoes. In its place came the mechanical hum of ventilation systems and the metallic clang of kitchen prep below. We reached a service hallway lined with industrial-grade doors and rolling racks stacked with folded linens. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a cold glow. This way, she breathed. She pushed open a storage room and pulled me inside. The air smelled faintly of bleach and dust. Cleaning carts crowded one wall. Stacks of banquet chairs leaned unevenly in the corner. The door shut with a quiet click. "Stay silent," she whispered. Not a word. My pulse was hammering. "What is this about?" I hissed. "Just listen." She cracked the door open slightly and peered into the hallway. I stood behind her, confused and irritated, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of the night. Was I hiding in a supply closet at my own daughter's wedding reception? Then voices drifted in. "I can't believe you actually pulled it off." A woman's voice. Familiar. Vanessa. The sound drained the warmth from my body. Julianne's maid of honor. My niece. My brother's daughter. The girl who had spent half her childhood at my house chasing Julianne through the gardens. "It wasn't that difficult," a man replied smoothly. "Gavin." The name hit like a blow. Diana glanced back at me and pressed a finger to her lips. Through the narrow crack in the door, I saw them, standing just outside, close, too close. Gavin's hand rested at the small of Vanessa's back, her body angled toward his naturally, comfortably. There was nothing distant or accidental about it. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't friendly. It was intimate. My niece, the same little girl who used to beg me to push her higher on the swings at the park. The same child who called me Uncle Peter with wide, trusting eyes. Now she stood in a dim hallway with my daughter's husband pressed against him, like they belonged to each other. "You're sure about this?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Once this happens, there's no turning back." "It'll be fine," Gavin replied calmly. "We've planned this." "I know, but that's a lot of money. $10 million in life insurance alone." $10 million. Life insurance. The word struck my chest like a sledgehammer. My breath shortened. "Trust me," Gavin continued. "The old man suspects nothing. He's too busy playing proud father tonight. And once everything's finalized—" "What about Julianne?" Vanessa interrupted. Silence. A long, suffocating pause. My heart pounded in my ears. "She's useful," Gavin said at last. "For now." Vanessa let out a soft laugh, cold, empty. "You're awful. I'm realistic. And when she stops being useful, then we handle it. Handle it. As if my daughter were a logistical problem. As if her life were a line item in a spreadsheet." Gavin leaned forward and kissed Vanessa's forehead. Slow, deliberate, familiar. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't impulsive. It was practiced. Like this wasn't new. Like she wasn't my niece. Like Julianne wasn't her cousin. "Relax," he murmured. "Everything is going exactly as planned. 6 months. Maybe less. Then we're set." "Promise?" she asked. "Promise." Vanessa stepped back and smoothed her bridesmaid dress, the same dress Julianne had excitedly helped her choose months ago. I remembered their laughter in fitting rooms, their whispered conversations about bouquets and color palettes. "I should get back," Vanessa said. "People will notice." "Go, I'll follow." She kissed him once more, brief but certain, then walked down the corridor, heels tapping against tile until the sound faded. Gavin remained. He straightened his tie, glancing at himself in a decorative mirror mounted to the wall. He smiled, charming, polished, the same smile he'd worn when he vowed to love my daughter forever. Then he walked away, whistling softly. I couldn't move. The air felt heavy, pressing against my lungs. Diana closed the door gently and turned to face me. "Now do you understand?" she whispered. $10 million. She's useful. 6 months. "Vanessa." "Family." "Mr. Kensington," Diana asked carefully. "Are you all right?" "No, I managed." "No, I'm not." She stepped closer. "I'm sorry you had to hear it that way. But you needed to know." "How long?" I asked. "How long have you suspected something?" "I've worked here 10 years, she said. "Staff see things people assume we don't. The way he looks at her when no one's watching. The way they vanish together. I've seen men like him before." Her jaw tightened. "They're predators." I leaned back against the wall. My legs felt unreliable. "Vanessa," I whispered. "She's my brother's child. I taught her to ride a bike. Took her to baseball games. I know. She and Julianne grew up together. Shared rooms during sleepovers. They were inseparable. And now she's chosen this," Diana said softly. "It's not your doing, Julianne." I breathed, my voice breaking. "My daughter." "She doesn't know," Diana said firmly. I would stake my job on that. She wouldn't have stood there otherwise. She married him, I said hollowly. 200 guests watched her say vows, and Vanessa stood beside her, smiling. The betrayal felt endless. Diana pulled a small card from her pocket and pressed it into my hand. My number, she said. If you need a statement, if you need someone to testify, I'll tell the truth. I stared at it. Why would you risk that, I asked. She hesitated only a second. Because I have a daughter too. And if someone knew she was in danger, I'd want them to speak. I slipped the card into my jacket. Thank you. Be careful, she warned. Men like Gavin don't quit easily. And if your niece is involved. I know, I said. This wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. She cracked the door open again. It's clear. Go back upstairs. Act normal. Don't let him know you heard anything. And then, her gaze hardened. Then you protect your daughter. She left me there in the dim room. For a long moment I stood still. Above us, music floated through the floorboards. Laughter, applause. 10 minutes ago, I had been toasting Julianne's future. Now I was surrounded by mops and folding chairs, realizing her husband had just discussed her death like a financial strategy. And my niece had agreed. I had no recording, no witnesses besides Diana, just words overheard in shadows. If I stormed back into that ballroom and confronted him, he would deny everything. Vanessa would support him. Julianne would look at me with confusion, maybe anger. I would lose her. No, I had to think. I forced myself into the corridor and climbed the stairs, smoothing my jacket, steadying my breathing. When I stepped back into the reception hall, the room glowed with warmth. Crystal lights shimmered overhead. Guests laughed. Glasses clinked. Julianne stood near the dance floor, smiling, her hand resting lightly on Gavin's arm. He leaned down and whispered something that made her laugh. From a distance, they looked perfect. But all I could see were shadows beneath the shine. 10 minutes had rewritten everything. And without proof, without witnesses, without time, I was going to have to save my daughter from the two people she trusted most. The house felt unnaturally still. I stood just inside the foyer of the Kensington estate a little after midnight, my keys still clutched in my hand, staring into the darkened hallway, as if the silence itself might explain what had happened. The drive home had passed in a haze, headlights slicing through black asphalt mile-peterers, blurring together, Diana's warning looping in my head like a broken record. Men like Gavin don't make mistakes. I let the keys fall onto the entry table. The small metallic clink echoed far louder than it should have in a house this large. Upstairs, the corridor lights glowed faintly, guiding me toward the master bedroom. I stepped inside, loosened my tie, and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped on one side mine. The other side remained perfectly smooth. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, Gavin's hand resting at Vanessa's waist. The way she leaned into him. The calculated calm in his voice. She's useful, for now. By 2 a.m, I stopped pretending I would rest. I went down the hall to my study. The room was a shrine to memory. Framed photographs lined the walls, years preserved behind glass. I turned on the desk lamp, and its golden glow spilled across polished wood and familiar faces. Julianne at 5, gripping a fishing rod twice her height, grinning proudly beside the lake. Julianne at 12, grass-stained and triumphant after scoring her first soccer goal. Julianne at 18, graduation cap, crooked Penelope's arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders. I stared at that last photo longer than the rest. Penelope would have known. She had instincts. I never developed the ability to read tone, posture, hesitation. She could spot insincerity from across a room. If she had stood in that cathedral yesterday, she would have seen through Gavin before the vows were finished. But she wasn't here, and I had missed everything. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The screen's cold light filled the room as I began typing, trying to assemble 2 years of moments I had dismissed as harmless. The questions about my business. Gavin's curiosity about projected revenue. His casual interest in long-term estate planning. Just making sure Julianne's protected, he had said lightly when asking about life insurance. $10 million, I had answered without hesitation. I remembered his smile. God, the engagement had happened fast. Too fast. I'd felt a flicker of concern, then a quiet voice suggesting caution. I'd silenced it because Julianne looked happy, because I wanted her to have what Penelope and I had built. Then, there had been his meeting with Henry Wallace 6 months earlier. He'd framed it as responsible planning understanding California estate law, making sure everything was secure. Secure. Now I saw it clearly. It hadn't been responsibility. It had been reconnaissance. And Vanessa, always present during the planning, always offering to help. I had admired her loyalty as a cousin. Now I understood she had been gathering information, positioning herself, reporting back. The red flags had been there all along. I had simply refused to see them. At 3 a.m, I opened a browser and typed how to investigate someone. The results flooded the screen: private investigators, background checks, financial audits, legal due diligence. I began taking notes. I needed to know who Gavin Ellington really was, his financial records, any outstanding debts, past relationships, former addresses, criminal history if there was one, patterns. I needed to know when this had begun between him and Vanessa. Was it before the engagement? Before the proposal? How deep was she involved? Were there emails, bank transfers, shared accounts, hidden communications? Most importantly, I needed to understand the plan. What exactly did they intend to do? How were they going to reach that $10 million? And when? But more than strategy, I needed proof, hard evidence, something that would withstand denial. Because Julianne could not know yet. If I confronted her now, armed only with overheard words and suspicion, Gavin would twist it. He would tell her I was paranoid, that I was grieving, that I couldn't let go. Vanessa would stand beside him and lie without blinking. My own niece would lie to my daughter, and Julianne would choose her husband. I could not risk that. At 5 a.m, the first gray hint of dawn edged the horizon. I rose from my chair and walked to the window. Light spread slowly across the estate grounds, the same lawns where Julianne had learned to ride her bike wobbling before finding balance, the same stretch of grass where we had celebrated her graduation. Yesterday morning, I had stood in this very spot and promised Penelope I would protect our daughter. I should have done more. I should have asked harder questions when Gavin proposed. I should have insisted on background checks. I should have trusted the unease that tugged at me during the engagement. A good father would have seen this coming. A better man would have stopped it before it began. Now Julianne was married to someone who had calmly discussed her death as a business transaction. The guilt pressed heavily against my chest, but beneath it something else formed. Resolve. I had failed to anticipate the threat. I would not fail to confront it. Gavin Ellington had underestimated something fundamental. He thought I was just a proud father, a businessman too comfortable to notice danger. He was wrong. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen island, watching the sunrise color the sky in pale orange and gold. The house no longer felt hollow. It felt alert. At exactly 8 o'clock, I picked up my phone. The first call was to Henry Wallace. Henry. Peter. Congratulations on yesterday. I need to see you today. It's urgent. A pause. What's happened? I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me at your office in an hour? Of course. I'll clear my schedule. Thank you. I ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Murphy Investigations. Frank Murphy, please. Speaking. My name is Peter Kensington. James Cooper gave me your name. I need to retain your services for a confidential matter. What kind of matter? He asked carefully. The kind involving my daughter's safety, and a son-in-law I believe is planning something I can't yet prove. Silence. Then I'm listening. Can you meet today? 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I ended the call and made the third. James. Peter. You sound exhausted. Are you all right? I need you at Henry's office at 9. What's going on? Gavin Ellington, I said evenly. And what I heard last night. James didn't hesitate. I'll be there. I set the phone down and stood still for a moment. The house remained quiet, but the silence had changed. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was preparation. 10 hours earlier, I had been raising a toast to my daughter's future. Now I was preparing for something far different. Gavin believed he had 6 months. He believed he had time. He believed I was blind. He had made a fatal miscalculation. Because now I knew. And a father who knows his child is in danger does not hesitate. He does not forgive. He does not retreat. He plans. The war had begun. Wallace and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a glass and steel tower in the heart of the financial district. I had walked into that building hundreds of times over the past 2 decades for mergers, contracts, succession planning. It had always represented stability. That morning, it felt like a crime scene waiting to be uncovered. The elevator ride stretched endlessly. Each illuminated number felt like a countdown. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, how I would explain what I had overheard without sounding irrational, without sounding like a grieving widower who couldn't accept his daughter's marriage. The doors slid open. The reception area was exactly as it had always been: polished mahogany desks, rows of leather-bound law volumes, sunlight reflecting off-framed degrees. The faint aroma of coffee mingled with expensive cologne. Mr. Kensington, Henry's assistant, said with a polite nod. "He's expecting you. You can go right in." Henry Wallace stood near the floor-to-ceiling window when I entered, phone pressed to his ear. He turned at the sound of the door. The moment he saw my face, his expression sharpened. He ended the call immediately. "Peter," he said, crossing the room. "You look terrible. I feel worse." He gestured toward the leather chairs near his desk. "Sit. Tell me what's happened." I sat down, but the words I had prepared dissolved the second I tried to speak. "Something happened at the reception," I managed. "A woman who works at the venue, Diana Foster. She pulled me aside, said I needed to hear something." Henry remained silent, attentive. "She hid me in a storage closet," I continued. "And I overheard Gavin and Vanessa." "Vanessa," he repeated carefully. "Your niece." "Yes." His jaw tightened slightly. "What did they say?" I told him everything. The way Gavin's hand rested on her waist. The mention of $10 million in life insurance. The calm, almost clinical way he said Julianne was useful for now. Vanessa's question about what would happen when she stopped being useful. I watched Henry's face as I spoke. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "You're absolutely certain?" he asked. "I'm certain." He moved to his desk and opened his laptop. "Then we need to review everything. That's why I'm here." Within minutes, he was pulling up digital records, printing documents, spreading papers across his desk. The methodical rhythm of a seasoned attorney replaced emotion with structure. "Let's start with life insurance," he said. He slid a document across to me. I recognized it immediately. $10 million policy, Henry said. Primary beneficiary, Julianne Kensington. "Yes, but 6 months ago," he continued, pointing at a clause, "you added a secondary beneficiary." I leaned closer. "Daniel Ellington," Henry said quietly. $6 million if both you and Julianne pass away." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible." Henry tapped the page gently. "It's your signature." I stared at it. The signature was mine. The date read February. Memory flickered back. A casual conversation in my study. Gavin explaining how standard protections worked. "He said it was normal," I murmured. "Said it protected Julianne." "And you trusted him," Henry said. "Yes." He made a note. "Next, the trust." He pulled another file onto the screen. $10 million trust established when Julianne turned 25. Locked until she turned 35 or married. She married Saturday. "Yes." Henry nodded. "Which means it unlocked Sunday morning. Julianne now has full access, and as her spouse Gavin has legal rights under California law." The implications sank in slowly. "There's more," Henry said. He turned his screen toward me again. "Your corporate succession plan. If you pass away, Julianne inherits your controlling shares. That's always been the structure. But 4 months ago you added a clause." He scrolled. "If Julianne inherits and then dies within 5 years, her spouse inherits her shares." The room seemed to tilt. "Gavin suggested that amendment too," I whispered. Henry folded his hands. "If you die, and then Julianne dies, Gavin inherits a company valued at approximately $47 million. $47 million, plus the life insurance, plus the trust. It wasn't a coincidence. When did he first contact you? I asked. Henry consulted his notes. February. He said he wanted to discuss estate planning before marrying Julianne. What did he ask? At first, routine matters. Then he asked what would happen if you became incapacitated. Who would assume decision-making authority? Incapacitated. I repeated the word, turning cold in my mouth. He wanted specifics. I stood and walked to the window, staring down at the morning traffic below. From 15 floors up, people looked small, anonymous, living ordinary lives. No one down there knew that a father was standing in a law office realizing his daughter might be in mortal danger. He's been constructing this for months, I said quietly. Yes, Henry replied. And if I go to the police now, it's hearsay. Henry did not argue. Can we undo this? I asked. All of it. Today. We can amend documents, he said carefully. But any changes trigger notifications. Gavin would be alerted within 24 hours. And then he may accelerate whatever he's planning. Or manipulate Julianne against you. I closed my eyes briefly. What do I do? We need evidence, Henry said. Proof of intent. Financial transfers. Communications. Something concrete. I've already contacted an investigator, I said. Frank Murphy. Henry nodded approvingly. Good. We spent another half hour reviewing copies of every relevant document. Life insurance policies, trust agreements, succession clauses. Each page felt heavier than the last. When I finally left his office, I carried a folder thick with paper and the weight of a calculated betrayal. The elevator doors slid shut. Halfway down, my phone buzzed. A text. From Gavin. Hey Peter, hope you're recovering from the big day. Want to grab lunch this week? I stared at the message. He sounded cheerful, relaxed, unaware that the foundation beneath him was beginning to crack. When I typed, Thursday, the Prime House. My treat. Thursday, 4 days away. 4 days to gather information. 4 days to prepare. I responded, Thursday works. Great. Looking forward to it. I slipped the phone back into my pocket as the elevator reached the lobby. He wanted lunch. He wanted proximity. Perhaps reassurance. Perhaps to measure me. That was fine, because now I understood something he did not. He believed I was blind. He believed I was grieving, distracted, predictable. He believed his plan was flawless. He had no idea I had spent the morning reviewing every document he had manipulated. No idea I had already hired an investigator. No idea the father he had underestimated was no longer reacting. He was calculating. I stepped out into the sunlight, the city noise rushing around me, and I waited. The corner cafe sat on a quiet street 3 blocks from the financial district. It was the kind of place businessmen used for meetings they didn't want, overheard booths with high backs, ambient noise from the coffee machine staff, who knew not to linger. I arrived 10 minutes early Tuesday morning and took a booth in the back corner. The waitress brought coffee without asking. I wrapped my hands around the mug and waited. Frank Murphy walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. I recognized him immediately from the photo on his website, mid-40s, solid build. The kind of face that had seen things and remembered them. He scanned the room, once spotted me, and crossed the cafe with the economical movement of someone who'd spent years in uniform. Peter Kensington, he asked. Frank Murphy. We shook hands. His grip was firm and brief. He slid into the booth across from me and declined the waitress's offer of coffee. Let's start with what you know, Conan, he said. I told him everything. The wedding, Diana's warning, the storage closet, the conversation I'd overheard between Gavin and Vanessa, the meeting with Henry Wallace and the documents we'd reviewed, the life insurance, the trust fund, the succession plan. The way Gavin had positioned himself perfectly over 6 months. Frank listened without interrupting. He didn't take notes, didn't pull out a phone or recorder, just listened with the focused attention of someone trained to hear what people weren't saying as much as what they were. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. You've been in business 40 years, he said finally. 42, and you're successful. Very successful. I've done well. That means you have good instincts, Frank said. You can read people. You know when something doesn't add up. Those instincts have kept you alive in a world where one bad deal can ruin you. I nodded. So when those same instincts tell you something's wrong with your son-in-law, you should trust them. He leaned forward slightly. I've been doing this work for 15 years. Before that, I was LAPD for 12. I've seen hundreds of cases like this, financial predators who target families, build trust, position themselves, then strike. And you know what they all have in common? What? The family members always say the same thing afterward. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. You're different. You're believing it now before it's too late. Something loosened in my chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Frank said. Let's talk about what we can do. He pulled out a small notepad, old school, no electronics. Investigation scope, he said. First, Daniel Ellington's background. I'll pull everything I can find. Employment history going back 10 years, credit reports, criminal records if they exist, past relationships, bankruptcies, lawsuits, anything that shows a pattern. Good. Second, Vanessa Reed, your niece. I need to know her involvement. When did this start? How deep is she in? I'll look at her financials, phone records, if we can get them legally, social media, any communications between her and Gavin. How do you get phone records legally? Subpoena if it goes to court, but that's later. For now, I have contacts who can pull metadata, call logs, text, timestamps, location data. Nothing that violates wiretapping laws, but enough to show patterns. I nodded. Third, surveillance. I'll put eyes on Gavin. Where he goes, who he meets, what he does when he thinks no one's watching. If he's meeting with Vanessa regularly, I'll document it. If there are other people involved, I'll find them. Other people. These things are rarely just two people, Frank said. There's usually a network. Friends who know accomplices who help, sometimes professionals hired for specific tasks. The thought made my stomach turn. Fourth, digital forensics. If Gavin's planning something, there's a digital trail. Emails, texts, searches, financial transactions. I have a guy who specializes in this, completely legal methods, publicly available information, social engineering, where appropriate. How long will this take? Preliminary findings by Thursday, Frank said. That's 2 days. I'll work fast because I understand the urgency. But a full investigation, the kind that builds an airtight case, could take weeks. I don't know if we have weeks. Then we focus on the immediate threat first, Frank said. Evidence of imminent danger. Anything that shows Gavin or Vanessa planning something specific in the near term. He set the notepad down and looked at me directly. I should mention something, he said. Diana Foster, the woman who warned you. What about her? She's my cousin. Well, second cousin, technically. We grew up in the same neighborhood. She called me Sunday morning and told me what happened. Said she'd given you her card and that you might reach out. I stared at him. You already knew. I knew what Diana saw and heard. Frank corrected. But I wanted to hear your side before I took the case. Wanted to make sure this wasn't just a misunderstanding or an overreaction. And it's not, Frank said. Diana has good instincts too. If she says your son-in-law is dangerous, I believe her. Relief flooded through me. Thank you for taking this seriously. I take everything seriously, Frank said. Especially when it involves a man who's been systematically positioning himself to inherit $47 million. He pulled a small device from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. It looked like a pen. A recording device, he said. Voice activated. Legal in California under one-party consent law. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it without the other person's knowledge. You want me to record Gavin? I want you to record everything, Frank said. Especially that lunch on Thursday. If he says anything incriminating, anything about his plans, about Julianne, about you, we need it on record. I picked up the pen, feeling its weight. What if he notices? He won't. It's designed to look exactly like a standard ballpoint. Just keep it in your shirt pocket, click it once to activate, click twice to deactivate. I slipped it into my jacket. One more thing, Frank said, his voice serious. Men like Gavin, when they feel threatened, they escalate. If he figures out you're investigating him, he might move faster than planned. You need to be careful. Don't let him know you suspect anything. I'm having lunch with him Thursday. Yeah, I know. Act normal. Be the proud father-in-law. Ask about the honeymoon. Laugh at his jokes. And record every word. We discussed the retainer $5,000, which I transferred to his account before we left the booth. Frank gave me his card, told me to call or text anytime, day or night. He'd send preliminary findings by email Wednesday evening with a full briefing before my Thursday lunch. One last thing, Frank said as we stood to leave. Your daughter, does she know any of this? No. Well, keep it that way until we have proof. If you go to her now with suspicions, Gavin will turn her against you. He's had 2 years to build trust with her. You'll be fighting an uphill battle. I know. We'll get the evidence, Frank said. And when we do, she'll see the truth. We shook hands again, and he left through the front entrance. I watched him go, then pulled out my phone to check the time. A text notification appeared on the screen from Julianne. We're back from the honeymoon. It was amazing, miss you so much. Can we do lunch or dinner this week, maybe Thursday or Friday? I stared at the message. My daughter, happy, excited, completely unaware that the man sleeping beside her every night was planning her death. The man I'd helped create the perfect trap for. My hands trembled as I typed, Thursday lunch won't work, I have a meeting. How about next week? I want to hear all about the trip. The response came immediately. Okay, love you, Dad. The email came in at exactly 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting alone in my home office, refreshing my inbox every few minutes. Like a man waiting for medical results he already feared. When Frank Murphy's name appeared in bold, my pulse jumped so hard it almost hurt. The subject line read, Preliminary Findings. There was a password-protected attachment. My hands felt colder than they should have as I typed in the street name where Frank and I had met that morning. The document unlocked. I read it once, then again, then a third time slowly, because I needed to be certain I wasn't misunderstanding what was in front of me. Gavin Ellington was 35 years old, born in Chicago, upper-middle-class upbringing. His father owned a regional construction supply company. His mother worked as a school administrator. For the first 22 years of his life, everything looked stable. Then 2008 happened. The recession wiped out the family business. 6 months after the bankruptcy, Gavin's father died by suicide. 2 years later, his mother died of cancer. On paper, it read like tragedy. Trauma. A young man left alone. But Frank's summary suggested something else had formed in the aftermath. Not just grief, but a decision. A resolve that he would never again be financially vulnerable. The financial breakdown that followed was staggering. Gavin owed $320,000. Unfinished MBA program loans, 7 maxed-out credit cards, casino records, online gambling platforms. He had built this mountain of debt while presenting himself to Julianne and to us as a successful financial advisor. Somehow he had concealed it from everyone, including my daughter. But that wasn't the worst of it. Frank had traced multiple offshore accounts in Gavin's name. Cayman Islands, shell structures, complex routing. Over the past 2 years, approximately $180,000 had moved through those accounts. The original source was unclear, but one transaction stood out. 2 months ago, $100,000 had been transferred directly into Vanessa Reed's personal checking account. $100,000. Tomenice. For what? For helping line my daughter up like a target. Frank's report didn't rely on assumptions. It documented. Next section, Jessica Morrison, 31 years old. daughter of a tech executive worth roughly $200 million. In 2018, she dated Gavin for 4 months. According to Frank's investigator, Gavin had been charming, attentive, intelligent. He asked about her interests, her goals, her future. Then he began asking about her trust fund. Who managed it? What would happen if something happened to her father? Who would control assets in an emergency? Jessica eventually discovered he had attempted to forge her signature on paperwork that would have granted him power of attorney over certain accounts. She confronted him. He denied it, then cried, claimed desperation. She never pressed charges. She simply cut him off, and he moved on. Frank's summary used one word repeatedly: pattern. Gavin targeted wealthy women. He embedded himself emotionally. He positioned for financial access. If manipulation failed, he pivoted. Julianne hadn't been an accident. She had been selected. Then came Vanessa's financial profile. $280,000 in debt, student loans, credit cards, a failed business loan. Her real estate commissions weren't enough to cover minimum payments. She had been teetering on bankruptcy. Frank's timeline showed that she and Gavin had dated 5 years ago. A messy breakup. Then 18 months ago, they reconnected. 16 months ago, Vanessa received $20,000 from one of Gavin's offshore accounts. Shortly afterward, she coincidentally arranged for Gavin to meet Julianne at a charity gala. 12 months ago, Julianne and Gavin began dating. 9 months ago, they got engaged. Vanessa naturally became maid of honor close enough to observe influence report. 6 months ago, Gavin was added to my life insurance policy and scheduled meetings with Henry Wallace regarding estate contingencies. 2 months ago, Vanessa received her $100,000 transfer, and now Julianne was married. The architecture of it was undeniable. 18 months of deliberate positioning. At least $47 million in potential inheritance if Julianne and I died within the appropriate window. I pushed my chair back and stood up because sitting had become impossible. But the most chilling section was still ahead: digital forensics. Frank had legally obtained search query records from Gavin's devices. He didn't elaborate on how. The searches read like a blueprint for murder. Substances that evade autopsy detection. How to stage residential accidents. Timeframes for life insurance payouts in California. Spousal inheritance timelines. Power of attorney processes. Symptoms of dementia versus medication side effects. He hadn't just considered financial angles. He had researched methods. He had typed them into a search bar. He had studied how to kill us. At the bottom of the report, Frank added a note. Gavin had begun constructing this plan before meeting Julianne. She was not a woman he fell in love with and later exploited. She was the objective. The relationship had been engineered as access. Frank's recommendation was blunt: implement protective measures immediately. He described Gavin as patient, methodical, and extremely dangerous. I sank back into my chair. My eyes burned, but I couldn't look away from the screen. Julianne was not a person to him. She was an acquisition, a $47 million strategy disguised as romance. And I had walked her down the aisle. I had shaken his hand. I had signed amendments adding him as beneficiary. I had toasted their future while he researched how to stage my death. My phone buzzed softly. A calendar reminder. Tomorrow, lunch with Gavin, 12:30 p.m., the Prime House. I stared at it. Tomorrow, I would sit across from a man who had spent 15 months integrating himself into my daughter's life, so he could eventually eliminate her. I would shake his hand. I would ask about honeymoon plans. I would smile, because if he sensed even slightly that I knew he would adapt, accelerate. He had already demonstrated he could plan long-term. If cornered, he might act sooner, and Julianne would pay the price. I closed the report and encrypted the file on an external drive. Then I sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the house around me. The truth was clear now. This wasn't impulsive greed. It was calculated predation. And tomorrow I would begin playing the role he expected. The proud father-in-law, the trusting businessman, the oblivious man. Because until I had everything I needed, evidence strong enough to destroy him completely, I could not afford a single misstep. Gavin Ellington believed he was the hunter. He had no idea he was no longer alone in the dark. Wednesday unraveled into a day of calculated preparation and tightly wound nerves. I met Frank twice, once in his office downtown, where he walked me through contingencies with the detached precision of a surgeon, and once in a quiet, underground garage where he handed me the recording pen. We tested it repeatedly. Clear audio, long range, no visible light. It looked like something I'd use to sign a contract, not dismantle a conspiracy. I practiced speaking in my study, replaying likely conversations with Gavin until the phrases lost texture. How was the honeymoon? We should review the estate plan. You're absolutely right. Smile. Don't overplay it. Don't reveal anything. By Thursday morning, exhaustion and adrenaline blurred together. Time felt distorted too fast, when I wanted space too slow, when I wanted it over. The Prime House stood in the financial district, like a monument to power, dark wood paneling, heavy leather booths, waiters who remembered your preferences before you spoke. I had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals at those tables. Today, I was negotiating survival. Gavin was already there when I arrived at exactly 12:30. He rose smoothly, suit tailored to perfection, confidence radiating off him as naturally as breath. "Peter, great to see you." He clasped my hand warmly. I ordered the Camus. "Hope that's all right." "Perfect," I replied, sliding into the booth opposite him. The recording pen rested in my shirt pocket, already running. 3 booths away, James Cooper sat alone, a folded newspaper in front of him. He didn't look in our direction. He didn't need to. His presence was reassurance. Frank insisted I wouldn't walk in alone. "How have you been?" Gavin asked, pouring wine into crystal glasses. "Feels like we barely talked after the wedding." "Busy week," I said evenly. "You know how it goes." He lifted his glass. "To family." The word felt bitter. "To family," I echoed, touching my glass to his. He spoke about the honeymoon first. "Maldives was unbelievable," he said, smiling. "Julianne hasn't stopped talking about it. She sent me photos," I replied. "It looked beautiful." "She is beautiful," Gavin said smoothly. "I'm the luckiest man alive." Luck. That was what he called strategy. The waiter approached, and Gavin ordered for both of us without hesitation. Tomahawk, ribeye, truffle, potatoes, grilled vegetables, another bottle of wine. His voice carried authority, as though directing outcomes was second nature. Once the waiter left, he leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to discuss something important," he began. "Succession planning." There it was. "You've built something incredible," he continued. "But if anything ever happened to you, God forbid, Julianne would need someone who understands the business. Someone capable of guiding her." "I'm not planning to go anywhere," I said calmly. "Of course not," he replied quickly. "You're in great health." "What did your doctor say at your last checkup?" "Clean bill," I said. "He said I could live another 30 years. I held his gaze. For the briefest moment, his smile faltered. It was gone in an instant, but I saw it. "That's wonderful," he said smoothly. "In fact," I added casually, "I'm thinking about running a marathon in 6 months." "A marathon," he repeated. "At 62. Why not?" "Is that wise?" he asked gently. "The strain on your heart. The risk of injury. You have responsibilities." "I'll be fine." He tilted his head slightly. "It just seems unnecessary risk." "You're essential." Essential. The steak arrived and we ate in silence for a few moments. Then Gavin set down his knife. "I really think we should review the estate documents," he said. "Insurance policies, trust structures. Make sure there aren't gaps. Everything's already in order." "I'm sure Henry is excellent," Gavin said. "But a second review never hurts." "Think of unforeseen scenarios." "What scenarios?" I asked. "Accidents," he said lightly. "If something happened suddenly, a fall, a car accident, we'd need to ensure Julianne has immediate access to liquidity." I placed my fork down deliberately. "I'm not planning on having any accidents." He laughed softly, but tension edged the sound. "No one plans accidents. That's why they're called accidents. They just happen." His tone was reasonable, concerned. Any outsider would hear care. I heard impatience. "How's Vanessa?" I asked evenly. His jaw tightened. "She's fine." She seemed stressed at the reception. "She's fine," he repeated firmly. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. Something in his expression shifted. It buzzed again. Then again. "I'm sorry," he said abruptly, standing. "I need to take this." He walked toward the restroom's phone pressed to his ear. Across the room, James lowered his newspaper slightly and gave me a subtle nod. 5 minutes passed. When Gavin returned, his posture had changed. The polished ease was gone, replaced by something coiled. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Work," he replied quickly. "Nothing serious." But he didn't touch his plate. "About meeting with Henry," he pressed. "Next Tuesday works for me." "Why Tuesday?" "It's not about the day. It's about being proactive." "For Julianne, you seem eager." "I'm responsible," he said sharply, then softened. "She's my wife." He was pushing too hard. "Let me check my calendar," I said. We finished lunch with brittle small talk. Gavin insisted on paying. Outside sunlight reflected sharply off surrounding towers. The city hummed as usual. Gavin placed his hand on my shoulder. Heavy, possessive. "I hope you're with us for a long time," he said. "Julianne needs her father." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied. He smiled, squeezed once, and walked toward his BMW, a car he couldn't afford, without deception. I watched him drive away. Fear settled deep in my chest. Not for myself, but for Julianne. "That was painful," James said quietly beside me. "It was worse than I expected," I admitted. Across the street, Frank Murphy stepped off the curb and approached. "I got everything," he said quietly, crystal clear. "And the phone call?" I asked. "That was Vanessa," Frank replied. My pulse spiked. "We had someone monitoring her line," he continued. "She said, 'They're asking questions.'" "I think the old man knows." The words echoed. "They're asking questions. He knows." James exhaled slowly. "They're nervous," Frank added. "That means pressure, or acceleration," I said. Frank nodded grimly. Exactly. Gavin had walked into that lunch confident. He'd left unsettled. Now they would adapt. And so would I. Because if they suspected even slightly that I was aware their timeline could compress, their patience could evaporate, which meant every move from this point forward had to be flawless. There would be no second chances. I invited Julianne to dinner on Friday evening at the estate. Just the two of us, I told her. I said I wanted to hear about the honeymoon properly. No rushed texts, no quick phone calls between meetings. She sounded genuinely happy when she agreed, and that happiness tightened something in my chest. I knew what the conversation would cost her. I just didn't know what it would cost me. I spent the afternoon cooking lasagna. Penelope's recipe, the one Julianne had requested every birthday from age 7 until she left for college. The scent of garlic basil and simmering tomato sauce filled the kitchen, clinging to the air like memory. If I was about to shatter my daughter's world, I wanted her mother's presence there, in whatever small way I could manage. Julianne arrived at 7 sharp. She stepped through the front door, glowing. There was no other word for it. Marriage, at least the idea of it, suited her. Her smile came easily. Her eyes were bright. She hugged me tightly and told me she'd missed me. For a brief, selfish moment, I considered abandoning the entire plan. Letting her keep her happiness for one more night. Letting her believe everything was safe. But Frank's report lived in my mind like a siren. Thursday's lunch with Gavin replayed in fragments. I couldn't wait. We ate slowly. She described the Maldives in detail, the white beaches, the water so clear it looked unreal, the overwater villa with glass floors. She laughed when she told me about a chef who had surprised them with a private dinner on the sand. She passed her phone across the table and showed me photos, her smiling against a sunset, Gavin's arm wrapped around her waist, their hands intertwined. I smiled when I was supposed to. I asked the right questions. Inside, I was calculating how to dismantle the illusion without breaking her entirely. After her second helping and coffee, I set my cup down carefully. "Julianne," I said quietly, "I need to talk to you about Gavin." Her smile faded almost instantly. "What about him?" "I need you to listen all the way through," I said. "Please." She put her cup down, fingers tightening slightly around the handle. "Dad, what's going on? Have you noticed anything unusual? Anything that didn't make sense?" She frowned. "You're scaring me." "What are you talking about?" I had rehearsed this with Frank. Practiced tone, sequencing, calm delivery. None of it mattered now. At the wedding, I said a woman who works at the venue warned me about Gavin. She hid me in a storage room. I overheard him talking with Vanessa, her face drained of color. You were hiding, she said slowly. At my wedding. It wasn't like that. You were spying on people during my reception. Julianne, please. They were discussing money, life insurance. Gavin said you were useful for now. Vanessa asked what would happen when you weren't. She pushed her chair back so abruptly, it scraped harshly across the floor. Stop. I know how it sounds. Do you? Her voice trembled. You're telling me you eavesdropped on my husband and twisted a private conversation into some paranoid fantasy. It wasn't twisted. I hired someone to investigate. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You hired a private investigator. I had to. You had to. What? She shot back. Prove that my marriage is a mistake. It's not about that. Is it impossible for you to believe someone loves me? She demanded. Without your money attached. I reached beside my chair and picked up the folder Frank had prepared. It was neatly organized: debts, offshore accounts, Jessica Morrison's statement, Vanessa's payments, digital searches. Look at this, I said gently, sliding it toward her. Please, just read it. She stared at the folder as though it were something alive. I'm not reading lies you paid for. They're not lies. These are records. Gavin has over $300,000 in debt. He attempted to forge documents for a previous girlfriend. He and Vanessa reconnected before he met you. There are bank transfers. Stop it, she shouted. You're in danger, I said, my voice breaking. He's planning something. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to believe my husband is a con artist, and my cousin is part of some murder plot. I know how unbelievable it sounds, because it is unbelievable. I stood slowly. Frank found search histories, substances that don't show up in autopsies, staged accidents, inheritance laws. She covered her ears for a second, then dropped her hands. You've lost your mind, she whispered. No, I said. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Being happy. That's not what this is. Isn't it? She snapped. You've been alone since Mom died. Now I'm married and suddenly you can't handle it. So you invent this story to pull me back. I would never do that. You already have. Tears filled her eyes. Do you think I'm stupid? That I can't choose someone good for myself? I think Gavin is dangerous. She shook her head slowly, disbelief giving way to anger. Mom would be ashamed of this. The words struck like a physical blow. What? She always said you were controlling. Julianne continued. I defended you. I told her she was wrong. But this. She gestured at the folder. This is disgusting. I'm doing this because I love you. You're doing this because you don't trust me. I don't trust him. All I hear, she said through tears, is that you think I'm incapable of making my own decisions. That's not true. It is. She grabbed her purse from the chair. You can't stand that I found someone who loves me without needing your approval. I just need you to read the evidence. I'm not reading it. She walked toward the foyer. I followed, desperate to slow her down, to find the one sentence that would make her pause. She turned at the door. When you're ready to apologize, she said coldly. Let me know. Until then, don't contact me. The door slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed through the house. I stood there for several seconds before moving. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. I returned to the dining room. The lasagna sat untouched in the serving dish. Steam had long since disappeared. Penelope's recipe. A symbol of comfort turned irrelevant. The folder lay exactly where I'd placed it, unopened, unread. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A text from Gavin. Hey, Peter. Julianne told me about dinner. I understand you're just trying to protect her. No hard feelings. Want to grab drinks tomorrow, just us guys. I read it twice. He knew. Vanessa had warned him. Julianne had confirmed it. And instead of backing away, he was leaning in, inviting me somewhere private. I lowered myself slowly into the chair Julianne had vacated. The house felt cavernous. I had tried to save my daughter, and in doing so I had pushed her directly into his arms. The evidence sat inches away. The lasagna cooled on the table. And for the first time since this began, I understood the cost of what I was fighting. I hadn't just risked my safety, I had risked her love, and I might have already lost it. Frank's call woke me at 7 Saturday morning. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, lying awake replaying my argument with Julianne and staring at Gavin's text invitation. When my phone rang, I answered on the first ring. "We have a problem," Frank said. I sat up. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that means tonight is more dangerous than we thought." "Get to your computer. I need to show you something." 5 minutes later, I sat in my home office staring at Frank's face on a video call. He looked as exhausted as I felt. "I've been monitoring Gavin's digital activity," he said. 3 days ago, he made several purchases from a chemical supply company. Laboratory-grade compounds with no legitimate use for someone like him. He shared his screen. Order confirmations filled the display. Frank highlighted one section. "Rare alkaloid compounds," he said. "In small doses, they mimic food poisoning or natural illness. They're virtually undetectable unless doctors know exactly what to test for." My stomach clenched. He's planning to poison someone. That's my conclusion. And yesterday, Vanessa Reed bought a burner phone in Pasadena. Paid cash. That's not normal behavior. What else? Frank's jaw tightened. "Gavin's car has passed your estate 4 times in the last 2 days. Not driven by. Passed. Like he's mapping the place." More screenshots appeared. His search history from last night includes food poisoning symptoms and emergency room response times. He's planning something soon. I struggled to breathe as the evidence stacked higher. "There's more," Frank said. I spoke with Jessica Morrison again. She finally told the full story. Gavin didn't attempt forgery once. He spent 3 months creating fraudulent documents to seize control of her trust. When her father confronted him, Gavin became violent, destroyed furniture, made threats. Her father paid him $50,000 to make him disappear. "Jesus, Jessica wanted me to warn you." She said Gavin becomes extremely dangerous when cornered. "The man you see isn't who he really is." I stood and stared out the window at the estate grounds. Gavin had driven past this house multiple times studying it. "What do we do?" I asked. "That depends on you," Frank said. "Gavin knows you're suspicious." Vanessa warned him. Julianne confirmed it. Now he has 2 options: retreat or accelerate. Which will he choose? He'll accelerate. He's 18 months into this plan, buried in debt. Tonight's drink invitation isn't friendly. It's strategic. You think he'll try something tonight? I think he'll probe you. Test how much you know. And if he feels threatened, he may act. "Have you contacted police?" "Yes. Detective Amanda Brooks. Financial crimes. She's interested, but needs more proof. Right now, it's circumstantial. We need Gavin on record. That's why I'm going." Frank nodded. "And we'll take precautions. I'm upgrading your recorder. It has GPS tracking. I'll be in a surveillance van nearby. James Cooper will be inside the bar. Patrol units will be on standby. What if things go wrong? We'll use a code word. If you say Penelope, we move immediately. But Peter, if you trigger it without proof of immediate danger, we lose our shot." Gavin lawyers up and disappears. "I understand." Frank leaned forward. "This isn't business. Gavin has researched poisoning. He's scouted your home. He's turned violent before. If tonight goes sideways, it will go fast." Footsteps sounded downstairs. James called my name. "I have to go," I said. "Send me the details." "Be careful. He has nothing left to lose." I ended the call and went downstairs. James stood in the foyer, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Don't go," he said. "James, I mean it. Let Frank handle this. Let the police. If I don't go, Gavin changes tactics. And Julianne becomes the next target. Then we protect Julianne, show her the evidence. She won't believe it. I tried last night. She thinks I'm controlling. James was silent. So what's your plan? I go. I wear the wire. I get him talking. We get evidence. Then it ends. And if he realizes you're recording, I say Penelope. And if help doesn't arrive in time, I had no answer. James shook his head. You're walking into a trap. Maybe. But it's the only way to save Julianne. She won't leave him without proof. I looked out at the rising sun over the estate. I'd spent 40 years building this life. I'd survived poverty recessions and losing Penelope. But I'd never faced someone who wanted me erased. In business, rivals want to beat you. They don't want you dead. Gavin didn't want to beat me. He wanted to replace me. He wanted my company, my wealth, my life, and the only thing between him and $47 million was me and my daughter. That made me dangerous. Not because I was ruthless, but because I had something to protect. And a father protecting his daughter is the most dangerous man alive. The Anchor was the kind of bar where businessmen went to close deals over expensive whiskey and pretend they were still young enough to drink on a Saturday night. I arrived at 7 exactly and found Gavin already seated in a corner booth, 2 glasses of amber liquid waiting on the table. He stood when he saw me, that practiced smile in place. Peter, thanks for coming. I know things have been tense. They have, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. The recording device was in my shirt pocket, already activated. 3 booths away, James sat at the bar, nursing a beer, his back to us, but positioned so he could see everything in the mirror behind the bottles. Gavin pushed one of the glasses toward me. Your favorite, Macallan 25. I thought we could clear the air properly. I looked at the glass. The whiskey was expensive, probably $60 a pour in a place like this. But it had been sitting there for a while. I could see the condensation on the outside of the glass, the slight separation of color at the top, where it had been exposed to air. Actually, I said, my stomach's been a little off today. I probably shouldn't. Something flickered across Gavin's face. Frustration. Anger. It was gone in an instant, replaced by concern. Come on, he said, picking up his own glass. Just one drink. For family. We need to get past this misunderstanding. The word misunderstanding hung in the air between us, as if my daughter's safety was just a communication problem. To family, Gavin said, raising his glass and waiting for me to do the same. The social pressure was immense. If I refused to drink, he'd know something was wrong. But if I drank from a glass he'd had sitting here before I arrived, a glass I hadn't watched being poured. I picked up the glass, brought it to my lips, pretended to take a sip while barely letting the liquid touch my mouth. Gavin's eyes narrowed. You haven't drunk yet. I did. No, you didn't. I saw you. Come on, Peter, one real sip. We're trying to move forward here. There was no way out. I took a small sip, the smallest I could manage without making it obvious I was avoiding it. The whiskey hit my tongue and I almost gagged. Underneath the smoky, peaty flavor of the Macallan was something else. Something bitter and chemical that didn't belong. I swallowed and set the glass down. There. Happy. Very. Gavin took a long drink from his own glass, watching me over the rim. Now about this private investigator business. I understand you're concerned about Julianne. That's natural. But hiring someone to dig into my background, that crosses a line. He kept talking something about the insurance changes being standard procedure, about wanting to protect Julianne's interests, about how much he loved my daughter. But I wasn't really listening anymore. I was focused on the heat spreading through my chest, the way my heartbeat was starting to accelerate, the slight dizziness that was making the room tilt at the edges. Have another sip, Gavin said, gesturing at my glass. You've barely touched it. I'm good. You sure it's really excellent whiskey? I'm sure, but he kept pushing, kept bringing the conversation back to the drinks, to taking another sip, to relaxing and enjoying the evening. And eventually, to avoid making him suspicious, I took another small sip. That was a mistake. The heat in my chest became a fire. My heart was racing now, pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Sweat broke out across my forehead and the back of my neck. The room wasn't just tilting anymore, it was spinning. I tried to keep my face neutral to not let Gavin see what was happening. But it was getting harder to breathe, harder to focus on his words. "You okay?" Gavin asked, leaning forward with what looked like genuine concern. "You look flushed. Just hot in here. You want me to ask them to turn down the heat?" "No, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. My hands were shaking. My vision was starting to blur at the edges. Even those 2 tiny sips had been enough. Whatever he'd put in that whiskey was working fast. "I need to use the restroom," I said, starting to stand. My legs didn't work right. I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling, then reach out and steady myself against the wall. The few steps to the bathroom felt like miles. I heard footsteps behind me. For a terrified second, I thought it was Gavin, but then James's voice said quietly, "I've got you." He helped me to the bathroom, and I barely made it to a stall before my stomach emptied violently. James stood outside, keeping watch, his presence the only thing keeping me from complete panic. "What happened?" he asked when I finally emerged, pale and shaking. "The drink. He put something in it." "Jesus, we need to get you to a hospital, now." "The glass," I said. "We need the glass. Evidence." "Forget the glass. Get the glass, James, please." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay here." He left, and I leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection. My face was gray. My pupils were dilated. I looked like a man who'd just been poisoned by his own son-in-law. When I came out of the bathroom, Gavin was standing near our booth, looking concerned in a way that would have seemed genuine if I didn't know better. "Peter, you don't look good. Should I call an ambulance?" "No." The word came out harsher than I intended. "James is going to drive me home. It's just food poisoning. Something I ate earlier." "Are you sure? Because you really don't look—" "I'm fine." James appeared with his jacket, which he'd wrapped around something, the glass, I realized. He'd taken the glass. "Come on," James said, putting his hand under my arm. "Let's get you out of here." We made it to the parking lot before my legs gave out completely. I collapsed against James's car, and he immediately pulled out his phone. "I'm calling 911, he said. "No, Peter, you've been poisoned. We're going to the hospital and we're calling the police." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't form the words anymore. The world was spinning too fast. My heart was beating too hard. Everything was going dark at the edges. I heard James on the phone, heard him give the address, heard him say possible poisoning, and we have evidence. Through the haze, I turned my head back toward the bar. Through the window, I could see Gavin still sitting in our booth. He wasn't calling Julianne, wasn't rushing out to see if I needed help. He was just sitting there, perfectly calm, sipping his whiskey, like nothing unusual had happened. Our eyes met through the glass, and he smiled. Not the charming smile he used with Julianne, not the professional smile he used with business associates. This was something else entirely. Something cold and satisfied. The smile of a man watching his plan unfold exactly as he'd designed it. The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing. As the paramedics loaded me onto the stretcher, I kept my eyes on that window, on Gavin Ellington sitting alone in that booth, watching me being taken away. He raised his glass in a small salute and took another sip of his whiskey. I woke to machines beeping and the smell of disinfectant. For a confused moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the memories came back: the bar, the whiskey, Gavin's smile. "Dad," Julianne's face appeared above me, tear-streaked and pale. She grabbed my hand. "You scared me to death. They said you were poisoned." If James hadn't called 911, her voice broke. "I'm okay," I managed. The door opened. A woman in a white coat entered, checking monitors. "Mr. Kensington, I'm Dr. Jennifer Hayes. You're very lucky. The preliminary toxicology results show unusual compounds in your system. Not typical food poisoning. Julianne looked between us. What does that mean? Dr. Hayes chose her words carefully. This wasn't accidental. We're required to report these findings to authorities. A detective will want to speak with you. She left saying she'd check back in an hour. Julianne turned to me frightened. Dad, what did you eat? Where did you go? I met Gavin for drinks. Her face went still. When? Last night. He texted me Friday, asked if we could talk, and you got sick after drinks with Gavin. Not a question. Her voice had gone flat. Julianne, tell me everything. Don't leave anything out this time. So I did. Diana Foster at the wedding, hiding in the storage closet, overhearing Gavin and Vanessa, hiring Frank Murphy, the debts offshore accounts Jessica Morrison, the chemicals Gavin purchased, his search history about accidents, last night's pre-poured drinks, the bitter taste. I pulled the recording device from my jacket. I was wearing this. Play it. We listened to Gavin's voice. The impatience when I tried to refuse. The false concern when symptoms started. When it ended, Julianne sat perfectly still. There's more, I said quietly. Frank Murphy knocked and entered with a briefcase. Mrs. Ellington, I'm Frank Murphy. Show me, Julianne said, hands shaking. Frank laid out documents. The glass from the bar. James gave it to me. We had it analyzed. He pointed to a report. Gavin's fingerprints. Chemical compounds matching what's in your father's bloodstream. He loaded a video on his tablet. Security footage from the anchor. Watch. On screen, Gavin arrived 20 minutes early. Ordered 2 drinks, pulled something from his pocket and dropped it into one glass. Stirred it with his finger. Waited. Julianne made a small sound. Frank pulled out a printed email. Intercepted this morning. Gavin to Vanessa Reed. Julianne read aloud, trembling. It's done. Now we wait. If the old man doesn't make it, we move on Julianne next. If he does, we accelerate the timeline. Either way, we're close. The paper slipped from her fingers. He tried to kill you, she whispered. Sweetheart, I brought him into our family. I defended him. This is my fault. No. I grabbed her hand. His fault. Only his. He's a predator. He fooled a lot of people. She was crying now, whole body shaking. I pulled her into a hug and let her fall apart the way she used to when she was small. Except this time, the thing that hurt her was the man she'd married. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. What do we do? Are you willing to help us catch him? She looked at the evidence. The glass, the email, the video. He tried to kill my father, she said, voice cold. Yes. Whatever it takes. A knock on the door. Gavin walked in, carrying flowers, concern on his face. He stopped when he saw me sitting up, Julianne beside me, Frank with his briefcase. For just a fraction of a second, his eyes swept over me, taking in my color, my alertness, the fact that I was alive. And I saw it. The disappointment, raw and undeniable, gone so fast you'd miss it if you weren't looking. But I was looking, and so was Julianne. Peter. Gavin said, concern sliding back. Thank God you're okay. That's wonderful news. He set the flowers down and smiled at Julianne. Honey, I came as soon as I heard. Why didn't you call me? I needed to be with my father, Julianne said carefully. Of course. Gavin glanced at Frank, then at me. I won't stay long. I just wanted to see you were all right. I appreciate that, I said. He lingered as if waiting for something. When none came, he smiled. I'll check in later. Get some rest, Peter. Julianne, call me when you're ready to come home. He left, closing the door gently. We sat in silence. He was disappointed, Julianne said quietly, when he saw you were okay. Yes, I said. And I saw it too, Frank added. That wasn't worry. That was someone whose plan didn't work. Julianne walked to the window staring out. When she turned back, grief was buried under something harder. What do we do? Frank closed his briefcase. We build a case. The glass is good, but we need more. We need him to incriminate himself on record. How do we make him think he's winning? I said. That I'm too sick to be a threat. That you still trust him. Julianne went pale. You want to use me as bait? No. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself. But I won't put you in danger. I'm already in danger, Julianne said. That email said if you survived, they'd move on to me next. At least this way we're controlling it. Frank looked between us. There's a detective I work with, Amanda Brooks. If we're doing this, we bring her in. Make it official. Do it, Julianne said. She looked at me, and I saw Penelope in her eyes, that same fierce determination. He hurt you. He planned to hurt me. He's not going to get away with it. I reached for her hand. Your mother would be proud of you. I hope so, because I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Frank gathered the evidence. I'll contact Detective Brooks today. Peter, you rest. Julianne, you go home and act like nothing's changed. Can you do that? I don't know, but I'll try. After Frank left, Julianne sat beside my bed. I loved him, she said finally. Or I thought I did. You loved who you thought he was. How do I go home and look at him, sleep in the same bed? You think about why you're doing it, about the evidence we need. I squeezed her hand. And you remember you're not alone. If anything feels wrong, you call Frank immediately. I will. She kissed my forehead. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. I watched her leave, walking out to face the man who'd tried to kill her father, and I prayed I was doing the right thing. Frank arrived Tuesday afternoon, carrying a thick manila envelope tucked beneath his arm and wearing the expression I had come to recognize over the past week. It was the look he wore when he had something concrete, something that shifted this from suspicion to certainty. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Full lab results, he said, spreading the contents of the envelope across the rolling hospital table at the foot of my bed. Julianne pulled her chair closer immediately. I sat up straighter, ignoring the ache in my side that was more exhaustion than injury. The sterile hospital room felt smaller as the pages fanned out before us. Chemical reports, fingerprint analyses, transaction records. Frank tapped the first document. The compound they found in your bloodstream. He began pointing to the highlighted section of a lab analysis. It's a synthetic alkaloid derivative, not something you find naturally. This isn't a household toxin. It had to be ordered deliberately, and whoever handled it needed a working knowledge of dosage. Julianne's voice was barely above a whisper. What would it have done? Frank didn't soften the answer. The amount in that glass was calculated to make him severely ill. Organ failure within 24 to 48 hours. It would have looked like sudden systemic collapse. If he'd finished the drink, Peter would not be sitting here. The words settled heavily between us. The room suddenly felt colder, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Frank moved to the next report. The glass, he said, sliding forward a series of enlarged fingerprint photos. Gavin's prints are everywhere. On the rim, the base, the whiskey bottle itself, and the residue at the bottom of the glass matches the compound in your bloodstream precisely. He laid down a timeline chart. Forensic analysis shows the substance was added at least 15 minutes before you arrived at the bar. Julianne exhaled slowly, steadying herself. That's premeditated, she said. Yes, Frank replied. It is. He reached for another document. I traced the purchase. 4 days before your meeting, an order was placed through a chemical supplier that services research labs. The shipping address was a P.O. box registered under D. Ellington. Payment was processed through a credit card linked to one of Gavin's offshore accounts. I leaned back against the pillows, staring at the black and white paper trail, that confirmed what we already knew. He planned it, I said. Meticulously, Frank answered. He picked up his tablet and swiped to another file. We also recovered Gavin's browser history through a cloud backup. He deleted it locally, but cloud archives persist longer than people realize. He handed the tablet to Julianne. 2 weeks ago, he searched optimal dosages for alkaloid derivatives. 3 days before the meeting, he researched symptoms in emergency room presentations. The night before, he looked up how quickly organ failure appears in toxicology reports. Julianne's hand tightened around the edge of the table. Frank scrolled further. And these are email exchanges between Gavin and Vanessa. He read aloud. 2 weeks ago, everything's ready. He swiped. Day of the meeting. Tonight. It happens tonight. Another swipe. After Peter survived, didn't work. He didn't drink enough. Now what? Julianne swallowed hard. She replied, abort, he knows. And Gavin wrote back, no, too deep. Find another way. Silence followed. Find another way, I repeated. Frank met my eyes. Yes. The implication was unmistakable. The failed attempt wasn't the end. It was a delay. Frank gathered the papers into 3 distinct stacks. We have strong physical evidence, the glass fingerprints, chemical match purchase records. Those will hold up anywhere. The emails are powerful, but the way we obtained them through a cloud security vulnerability could be challenged in court. So what's the plan, I asked. Frank's expression hardened. We need him to act again. Under controlled conditions. We catch him in the act with law enforcement present. Then everything else becomes supporting evidence of a pattern. Julianne stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. You want to use me again, she said quietly. Not use, Frank corrected. A controlled operation. She didn't turn around. Your father's health appears to decline. Frank continued. You tell Gavin the doctors are worried. You lean on him emotionally. We install surveillance in your apartment with your consent and a warrant and monitor everything. How long, she asked. 2 to 3 weeks to build an airtight case. She turned, then anger and fear battling in her eyes. You're asking me to live with a man who tried to kill my father, who plans to kill me next. With round-the-clock surveillance, Frank said firmly. Cameras in every room, audio monitoring, panic button. He placed a small device on the table. Press this and police respond in under 3 minutes. I looked at Julianne. You don't have to do this, I said. She met my gaze. The look in her eyes was unmistakable. Determination. The same resolve Penelope used to carry when she made a decision. Yes, I do, she said. This ends properly. Not with him slipping away on a technicality. Not with him targeting someone else. This ends with him in prison. Frank nodded once. Peter, you're discharged tomorrow. But we circulate the narrative that recovery isn't going well. Complications, internal damage, and I act scared, Julianne said. Yes, you confide in him. You make him believe the poison worked slowly. And when he tries again, she asked, we close the trap. What about Vanessa, I asked. Detective Brooks will bring her in once we solidify the case against Gavin. She'll fold. She's not built for prison. That evening, I stood by the hospital window and watched Julianne walk to her car in the parking lot below. She hugged me for a long time before leaving. Call me if anything feels wrong, I told her. Anything, she promised. Frank had installed surveillance in her apartment that afternoon, while Gavin was at work. Cameras concealed in smoke detectors. Audio embedded in light fixtures. Everything streaming to a secure server monitored by Frank and Detective Brooks in real time. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Julianne. I'm home. Told him the doctors are worried about internal damage, that you may not recover fully. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. He smiled, Dad. When I said it, he actually smiled. A chill ran through me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Frank. Peter, he said immediately, no greeting. We have an issue. What is it? Gavin just opened his laptop. We're monitoring live through the surveillance feed. He's searching something. My heart pounded. What? Frank's voice dropped. He just typed, how to make death look like post-recovery complications from poisoning. The words sucked the air from my lungs. Get her out, I said instantly. Peter, if we pull her now, we lose. I don't care, I snapped. Get her out. Now. A brief silence crackled through the line. Then Frank said, understood. Initiating extraction protocol. Stay with me. I pressed the phone harder to my ear and stared through the hospital window at the distant glow of city lights. Somewhere within that skyline, my daughter sat across from a man, calmly researching how to kill me, and possibly her, and disguise it as natural decline. On Frank's end, I could hear faint voices, radio chatter movement. Unit en route, someone said. Seconds stretched painfully. My mind raced with images, Gavin standing behind her, Gavin slipping something into her drink, Gavin losing patience. Where is she? I asked. In the living room, Frank replied. She's playing along. We signaled her to step into the hallway. More voices, a door closing. She's moving, Frank said. Elevator. My breath caught. We've got her. She's with officers now. I closed my eyes in relief. And Gavin, I asked. He's still inside. Laptop open. We're holding for warrant confirmation. I looked back at the skyline. We had waited carefully, strategically. But evil rarely waits politely. And as I stood there gripping the phone, listening to the controlled urgency on the other end, I understood how narrow the margin truly was. One miscalculation, one delayed reaction, and we might have been too late. I didn't let Frank extract Julianne that night. Instead, I made a decision. We were too close. We had evidence, but not enough to guarantee Gavin would spend the rest of his life in prison. Not yet. We needed more. We needed him confident, careless, convinced he was winning. So I became exactly what he wanted me to be, a dying man. Week 1. They discharged me Wednesday morning, and I made sure the performance was convincing. The slow walk to the car, the way I leaned on Julianne's arm, the exhaustion that wasn't entirely fake after days in the hospital. Dr. Hayes played her part perfectly. Before we left, she called Gavin and Julianne into her office and delivered the news with calm professionalism. The internal damage is worse than we thought, she said. His liver function is declining. We're monitoring closely, but the prognosis is uncertain. Gavin's face showed concern, but underneath it, I saw something else, satisfaction. How long, he asked. We'll know more in the coming weeks, Dr. Hayes replied. He needs rest and support. Gavin volunteered immediately. He and Julianne would stay at the estate. Help with everything. Be there for me. I let him. That first week, he hovered constantly. Outside my bedroom, in doorways, always asking the same question. How are you feeling today, Peter? And every time I gave him exactly what he wanted to hear. Tired. So tired. I don't think I have much time left. Frank's cameras captured everything. Gavin searching my office, flipping through financial documents, photographing pages. Thursday night, we recorded a call between him and Vanessa. It's working, Gavin said. The poison is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Slowly. How long, Vanessa asked. A few more weeks, maybe less. Every night, Julianne updated Frank using a burner phone hidden in her purse. Every morning, she met Frank and Detective Brooks at a coffee shop while Gavin thought she was at yoga. We built the case one recording at a time. Week 2. I graduated to a walker. Let my hands shake. Let him help me stand. Gavin watched with open anticipation. The board meeting happened Tuesday. I joined by video and insisted Gavin sit beside me. When I told the board I needed to step back temporarily, Gavin was ready. I'll handle operations until Peter recovers, he said, his hand resting on my shoulder. They agreed. He received temporary executive authority. After the call ended, Frank's cameras showed Gavin alone in my office texting Vanessa. I'm in control now. Won't be long. He poured himself my bourbon and toasted Penelope's portrait. That week he made reckless decisions, moves I would never approve. I let him. Every unauthorized business action was documented. His internet searches escalated. How to detect suffocation by pillow, staging accidental overdose, fatal falls in recovering patients, Julianne watched the footage with me pale. He's planning something soon. I know, I said. That's what we're waiting for. Week 3. The wheelchair was Frank's idea. Sell it completely, he said. I did. Let Gavin push me through the house. Let him see how weak I'd become. Thursday. Henry Wallace arrived with documents. Loud enough for Gavin to hear. Power of attorney, Henry said. Just a precaution. Gavin appeared instantly. I signed the fake documents Henry had prepared. Gavin watched every stroke of the pen. Just a precaution, he said afterward. You'll pull through. I hope so, I whispered. Friday. Vanessa visited the estate. Frank's cameras caught her and Gavin in the garden. A detective's asking questions, Gavin warned. Amanda Brooks. I haven't said anything, Vanessa said. 1 more week, Gavin replied. Then we're free. Once he's dead, we wait deal with Julianne and everything's ours. That night, Frank called an emergency meeting. All of us. Secure location. He said 1 week, Brooks said. That's our window. What's the plan? Julianne asked. Tomorrow morning, Frank said. Peter gets rushed to the hospital. Sudden decline. Gavin panics. He makes a move. We catch him. That night, Julianne and I sat alone. I can't lose you, she said. You won't, I promised. Tomorrow this ends. The ambulance arrived at dawn. A staged emergency. Julianne cried into the phone, saying I couldn't breathe. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I kept my eyes half closed. Gavin stood in the doorway. He wasn't helping. He was texting. As the doors closed, I saw him watching us leave, calm and certain. The sun rose behind him. The trap was set. This is it. The moment everything has been building toward. 3 hidden cameras. A detective team waiting next door. Frank in the hallway. And me. Lying in that hospital bed, wired up, pretending to be dying. 1 wrong move and it's over. Tell me honestly, if your child's life were at risk, would you risk everything to save them? Comment 1 if you would. Or type protect if nothing would stop you. Now, let's step into the storm. They admitted me just after sunrise, charted as critical. The nurses who weren't part of the operation believed it completely. I'd spent 2 weeks rehearsing the symptoms, shallow breaths that made my chest barely rise, the faint tremor in my hands, the slight delay before answering questions as though my mind were struggling to stay conscious. Makeup artists from the department had shadowed my eyes and dulled my skin tone. An IV line ran into my arm. Oxygen tubing rested beneath my nose. The monitors beside my bed emitted steady, convincing beeps. Only Dr. Hayes and a tightly controlled team knew the truth. The room was a private suite on the 4th floor, selected because of its layout. Every corner had been studied. Cameras were concealed in the smoke detector behind the television mount and within the slatted cover of the air vent. 3 angles. No blind spots. Audio captured through a hidden mic embedded in the bedside monitor. In the adjacent suite, Detective Brooks sat before a bank of screens with 2 uniformed officers. Frank stationed himself downstairs in the cafeteria with a clear line of sight to the elevators and stairwell. Text alerts were synchronized. If Gavin moved, they would know. The trap was ready. Now we waited. Gavin and Julianne arrived just after 2. I heard them before they entered. Julianne's voice, tight with fear, Gavin's lower, soothing murmur meant to calm her. When they stepped inside, I kept my eyes half closed, breathing shallowly, letting my body go limp against the hospital sheets. Dad! Julianne rushed to my side and gripped my hand. Her fingers trembled. Even though she knew this was staged, knew we were luring him, the strain of the last 3 weeks had carved lines into her face. Fear, even rehearsed fear, leaves Peters. Dr. Hayes followed them in clipboard and hand expression grave. His organ failure is accelerating, she said professionally. His liver function has dropped sharply in the last 12 hours. I need to prepare you, he may not survive the night. Julianne made a broken sound, half sob, half gasp. Gavin's arm wrapped around her shoulders instantly. He pulled her close lips, brushing her hair in a performance so tender it would have fooled anyone. We'll get through this, he murmured. I'm right here. Dr. Hayes offered one last sympathetic look and stepped out, closing the door quietly behind her. The room settled into waiting. Hours passed. Julianne sat beside me holding my hand, speaking softly about memories, childhood camping trips, the time I'd taught her to drive. Gavin sat slightly back, scrolling on his phone, occasionally standing to stretch or glance out the window. But he kept looking at me, watching, measuring. As afternoon bled into evening, the sunlight through the blinds shifted from gold to gray. My breathing remained steady, shallow. I counted seconds between his glances. Finally, Julianne stood. "I need coffee," she whispered. "And air." "Can you stay with Dad?" "Of course," Gavin replied without hesitation. "Take your time." She bent and kissed my forehead. The door closed softly behind her, and then we were alone. In the adjacent room, Detective Brooks leaned closer to the screens. Frank received the automated alert that Julianne had exited and began moving toward the elevators. The moment had arrived. Gavin remained seated for several seconds, studying me. Then he rose. He walked to the door and opened it slightly, checking the hallway. Satisfied, he shut it and locked it. My pulse slowed deliberately. He returned to the chair, reached inside his jacket, and withdrew something small and silver. A syringe. Visual confirmation, one officer whispered in the surveillance room. Gavin rotated the syringe between his fingers, inspecting it with almost clinical detachment. Then he leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on my face. "You should have died at the bar," he said quietly. His voice had no warmth now. "That would have been cleaner, faster. But you only took a few sips. You were cautious." He stood and stepped toward the IV line. "This time you won't wake up. Organ failure, complications. It'll be tragic but believable. Your own doctors will sign off." He held the syringe up, thumb resting lightly on the plunger. "Julianne will be devastated," he continued conversationally. "But she'll have me. I'll comfort her, guide her. Eventually she'll heal. People always do." He smiled faintly. "And I'll have everything. The company, the accounts, the legacy." The needle hovered inches from the IV port. "I wouldn't do that." My eyes opened fully. Gavin froze. "What? You're on camera," I said evenly, voice strong and clear. 3 angles. Audio included. Detective Brooks is next door with 2 officers. It's finished. The color drained from his face. His hand trembled. The door exploded inward. Detective Brooks entered with her weapon-drawn officers flanking her. "Gavin Ellington," she commanded. "Drop the syringe and put your hands where I can see them." For one terrifying second, I thought he might plunge it into the IV anyway. His gaze darted to the window. The door. Back to me. Then the syringe clattered to the floor. He raised his hands slowly. "You have the right to remain silent." Brooks began stepping forward with cuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." "This is entrapment," Gavin shouted. "You set me up." "No," I said, sitting upright and removing the oxygen tubing. "This is consequence." The mask he had worn for 2 years disintegrated. In its place, fury. "You should be dead!" he screamed, lunging toward me. The officers intercepted him instantly, driving him to his knees and wrenching his arms behind his back. "You ruined everything," he shouted, struggling. "It was perfect. I planned it perfectly." Julianne appeared in the doorway. She had not gone far. Gavin saw her. His expression shifted instantly, rage dissolving into desperation. "Julianne, please," he pleaded. "Baby, listen to me. They're lying. They manipulated everything. You know me." Her face was pale but resolute. "I know exactly what you are," she said quietly. "I've known for weeks, and I helped them." The words hit him harder than the handcuffs. "You..." "Goodbye, Gavin." The officers hauled him upright. He fought, shouted threats, cursed until his voice echoed down the hallway and finally faded. Silence followed. Brooks holstered her weapon and exhaled slowly. "That was incredibly brave," she said to me, "and incredibly dangerous. If he'd moved faster." "But he didn't," I replied. Julianne stepped to the bed and gripped my hand again, this time in relief, not fear. Then my phone buzzed on the bedside table. "Unknown number." I picked it up. The message read, "You caught him, but you forgot about me." I have evidence that will destroy you, both photos, recordings, everything. Meet me. Midnight. Port Authority South Entrance. Come alone or I go public. I handed the phone to Brooks. Vanessa, Julianne whispered. Brooks read it carefully. She wasn't picked up yet, she said. She slipped away. She's panicking, I said. And panicked people are unpredictable, Brooks replied. The clock on the wall read 7:30 p.m. 4.5 hours. Julianne swallowed hard. What evidence? If she had something real, she'd have used it already, Brooks said thoughtfully. This is leverage. She wants control, I added. Brooks nodded. Which means we can use that. I looked at Julianne. You don't have to be part of this, I told her gently. She squared her shoulders. She betrayed me, Julianne said. I'm finishing this. Brooks began outlining options: controlled meet, undercover placement, tracking, audio surveillance. Midnight would come quickly. And Vanessa Reed believed she still held a card. She was wrong, but she was dangerous. And we had 4.5 hours to make sure no one else ended up in a hospital bed for real. Detective Brooks studied the text message on my phone, her expression grim. Without a warrant, I can't officially help you. A threat alone isn't enough for me to mobilize units. So what do we do? Julianne asked. You stay here, I said firmly. Under protection. Hospital security will keep you safe. Dad, I'm not letting you go alone. You're not. Frank will follow at a distance, and Brooks will have units on standby ready to move the second Vanessa does something actionable. I looked at Brooks. Right. She nodded. The moment she produces a weapon or makes a concrete threat, we move in. But Peter, you need to understand, if she's smart enough to stay just on the legal side of the line, my hands are tied. She won't be smart, I said. She's panicking, and panicked people make mistakes. I left the hospital at 11, driving my own car to the old Port Authority district on the south side. The area had been abandoned for years, waiting for redevelopment that never came. Empty warehouses lined the waterfront, their windows dark and broken. Frank followed 3 blocks behind in an unpetered sedan. Brooks had 2 patrol units staged 5 minutes out, engines running, waiting for my signal. At 11:50, I pulled into the cracked parking lot of the main warehouse. The building loomed above me, 5 stories of concrete and rust. A single light glowed in a 3rd-floor window. I got out of the car and walked to the entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside the warehouse was a maze of shadows and old equipment. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Then a voice came from somewhere above me, distorted through old speakers. Hello, Peter. Vanessa, I said. Show yourself. Not yet. First, I want you to know I'm not stupid. I knew you'd bring backup. Frank Murphy is parked 3 blocks east. Very predictable. My blood ran cold. She'd been watching. I've changed the plan, Vanessa continued. While you were driving here, I made a stop at the hospital. Julianne was there all alone. Such bad timing. A screen flickered to life on the far wall, an old monitor mounted to a support beam. The image showed Julianne tied to a chair, in what looked like another warehouse duct tape across her mouth, fear in her eyes. What did you do? I demanded. Vanessa stepped out from behind a stack of crates, keeping her distance. She looked nothing like the polished real estate agent I'd known. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wild. A woman at the end of her rope. She's somewhere else. With people I paid very well to keep her quiet. What do you want? $20 million. Wired to an offshore account. Right now. I can't access that kind of money in the middle of the night. Yes, you can. Wire transfer. I know you have the banking app on your phone. I've watched you use it. Do it now, or I make 1 phone call, and those men put a bullet in your daughter's head. My hand went to my pocket, pulling out my phone. The earpiece Frank had given me was nearly invisible, tucked deep in my ear canal. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Keep her talking, Frank's voice whispered. We're tracking the video signal. I opened my phone slowly, pretending to navigate to my banking app. This is going to take a few minutes. The security protocols, I don't care about your protocols. Transfer the money. I'm trying. But these systems are complicated. You're stalling, Vanessa said, her voice rising. She reached behind her back and pulled out a gun, small silver shaking in her hand. Stop stalling and transfer the money. I raised my hands. Vanessa, think about what you're doing. You pull that trigger, you go from accessory to murder to actual murder. There's no coming back from that. I'm already in too deep. Gavin's been arrested. They have evidence. I'm going to prison unless I disappear, and I can't disappear without money. Franca, I said quietly, knowing he could hear me. Any luck? I found her. His voice crackled in my ear. Julianne's at the South Warehouse, 2 buildings over. Police are moving in now. Stall for 30 more seconds. Vanessa, I said, taking a step forward. I didn't come here without insurance. What are you talking about? And I'm talking about the fact that Detective Brooks has been listening to this entire conversation. And right now, her units are surrounding this building. As if on cue, spotlights flooded through the broken windows. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside. Brooks's voice came through a megaphone. Stay, Vanessa Reed, drop your weapon and come out with your hands up. Vanessa's face went white. The gun wavered. It's over, I said quietly. Gavin promised, she whispered. He promised we'd be rich, that we'd be free. He said all we had to do was wait and then it would all be ours. Gavin lied to you, just like he lied to everyone. The gun slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. She sank to her knees, and Brooks's officers swarmed in weapons drawn. They cuffed her gently. She didn't resist, just kept whispering Gavin's name over and over. I grabbed Brooks as she passed. My daughter, her radio crackled. Units on scene at South Warehouse. 2 male suspects in custody. Female victim located and secure. No injuries. Sean, Brooks said. We've got this. I ran. The South Warehouse was only 2 blocks away, but it felt like miles. By the time I got there, patrol cars had the building surrounded. EMTs were walking Julianne out, a blanket around her shoulders, the duct tape gone from her mouth. When she saw me, she broke away from the paramedics and ran. I caught her and held on tight, feeling her shake against me. I'm here, I said. I'm here, you're safe. I knew you'd find me, she whispered. I knew you would. Over her shoulder, I watched 2 officers lead 2 men out of the warehouse in handcuffs. Andre Williams and Jeff Collins, the names would come later. Vanessa had hired them off some dark web forum, promised them $5,000 each to grab Julianne and keep her quiet for an hour. They were desperate, broke, and stupid. They'd had no idea what they were really part of. But that didn't matter now. All that mattered was that Julianne was safe. Gavin was in custody. Vanessa was in custody. And after 3 of the longest weeks of my life, it was finally over. The EMTs worked quickly beneath the harsh sodium lights of the Port Authority warehouse. Their voices were calm and professional as they checked Julianne's vitals. I stood a few steps away, watching my daughter sit on the edge of the ambulance, wrapped in a thermal blanket that made her look smaller than she was. Rope Peters on wrists and ankles, one of them said while typing on a tablet. Dehydration. Mild shock. But she's physically stable. Detective Brooks approached, notepad in hand. Julianne, I know this is difficult, but I need a brief statement tonight. We'll do a full interview tomorrow. Julianne nodded. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. I left the hospital to go home. Vanessa met me in the parking garage. She said Catherine, my college roommate, had been in an accident and needed me right away. And you went with her? Brooks asked. She was family, Julianne said quietly. I trusted her. Brooks wrote quickly. What happened next? She drove me here instead. 2 men were waiting. They tied me up and kept me in that room. Julianne glanced toward the warehouse. I was scared, but I stayed calm. I kept thinking, Dad will find me. I stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. She leaned into me without a word. That's enough for tonight, Brooks said gently, closing her notebook. Go home. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Frank Murphy emerged from the shadows, exhaustion etched into his face. It's over, Peter. Both of them are in custody. Gavin's being held downtown. Vanessa's at the precinct. The evidence is solid. I shook his hand. Thank you, Frank. For everything. He shook his head. Thank Diana. Her courage set this in motion. The drive home was quiet. Julianne stared out the window at the empty streets as the sky slowly lightened. I feel so stupid, she said at last. You're not! I believed him. I married him. I let Vanessa. She stopped shaking her head. How did I not see it? You knew how to trust, I said. That's not the same as being foolish. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. You will, I said, with time and healing. When we pulled into the driveway, James Cooper sat on the front steps holding 2 cups of coffee. Frank had called him. He stood as we approached, relief written across his face. Thought you might need breakfast, he said. Inside the house felt warm and safe. James moved quietly in the kitchen, making eggs and toast, while Julianne and I sat at the table. A short while later, Frank arrived with updates. Gavin's being held without bail, he said. Flight risk. Vanessa's cooperating. She'll testify for a reduced sentence. The 2 men who held Julianne will likely take minimal sentences. Julianne looked up. What happens to Gavin and Vanessa? Gavin's facing at least 25 years, Frank said. Attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy. Vanessa will likely get 15, possibly less with cooperation. Julianne nodded slowly. After Frank and James left, the house grew quiet. Julianne stood in the living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Can I stay here tonight, she asked. I can't go back there yet. This is your home, I said. It always has been. Upstairs, her room remained unchanged. The posters, the books, the quilt Penelope made when Julianne was 10. Will you stay until I fall asleep? She asked softly. Of course. Thank you, Dad, for not giving up. Protecting you isn't a choice, I said. It's who I am. Her breathing slowed as she drifted to sleep. I stayed until I was sure she was resting peacefully. Downstairs, I picked up the framed photo on the mantel, Penelope, Julianne, and me at the beach laughing. We did it, I whispered. We kept her safe. Outside, the sun rose over the lawn. The nightmare was over. Now came healing. Together, as a family. A month after Port Authority, we stood in a packed courtroom. Gavin sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, shoulders slumped, face hollow. The man who'd smiled at me across the dinner table was gone. Judge Robert Harrison read the sentence without emotion. 25 years in state prison. No parole eligibility for 15 years. The gavel struck. As Gavin was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Julianne one last time. Her face remained cold as stone. Outside, reporters surrounded us. Justice has been served, I said simply. Now we heal. Julianne stepped forward, her voice steady. To anyone being manipulated, speak up. Trust your instincts. You deserve better. Vanessa's sentencing came that same week. 15 years. As we left the courtroom, she called out, I'm sorry. I was desperate. Julianne didn't respond. By the 3rd month, Julianne had found her footing. I watched from the back of the Kensington construction boardroom as she presented her proposal. I'm proposing the Kensington Family Victim Advocacy Fund, she said confidently. Programs for survivors of manipulation and abuse. Counseling, legal support, background checks, support groups. The board voted unanimously in favor. After the meeting, I pulled her aside. Your mother would be so proud. So am I, Julianne said, smiling. I feel like myself again. Around the same time, I took Diana Foster to lunch at an upscale restaurant. I slid an envelope across the table, documents establishing the Diana Foster Scholarship Fund. $2 million for children of service workers. Diana's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Keep doing what you do, I told her. Keep watching. Keep being brave. A week later, Diana was promoted to Director of Event Venue Management. She'd earned it. 6 months after the nightmare began, we returned to the waterfront for a charity gala. 500 people filled the ballroom. Julianne stood at the podium in a navy gown, poised and radiant. 6 months ago, I was a victim, she began. Tonight, I'm a survivor. Wealth is measured by integrity, not dollars. If you're being manipulated, speak up. Trust your instincts. Survivors, you're stronger than you think. The applause was thunderous. I felt tears streaming down my face. After the gala, we stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. I never thought I'd be happy again, Julianne said. And now I'm thinking about dating again, someday. She laughed at my expression. I'll be more careful. I'll trust my instincts. Do you ever think about them? She asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Mostly I think about you, about the life we're building. Money can be a curse, she said quietly. Money is a tool, I replied. It's what we do with it that matters. The next morning, I sat in my office. On my desk were 2 photos, the old one with Penelope and young Julianne at the beach, and the new one from the gala. Julianne and me arm in arm, smiling. People ask if I regret being wealthy. I don't. I regret that it attracted predators, but it gave me the resources to fight back, to protect my daughter, to build something that matters. The lessons are simple: stay vigilant, trust, but verify, love deeply, but stay awake. Protect the people who matter. Julianne appeared in the doorway. Ready for breakfast? Where to? The corner cafe, where you met Frank. Full circle. We walked out into the California sunshine together, heading toward the cafe where a stranger's courage had changed everything. If you're listening to this story, know this: predators exist, but so do survivors. My daughter survived, thrived, and became stronger. Trust your instincts. Protect your loved ones. Wealth isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by what you're willing to fight for. Evil exists, but so do love, courage, and family. And those things always win. The nightmare was over. The healing continued. This morning, just breakfast. Together. Exactly the way it should be. If you've stayed with me through this entire family story, then you already understand what this was really about. Not money, not power, not even revenge. The greatest battles we fight are for the people we love. And this family story was about a father who refused to look away when danger stood at his door. 3 times during this nightmare, I found myself on my knees praying. The first time was in that storage room at the wedding reception. I had just overheard Gavin plotting against my daughter. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. But I didn't pray for revenge. I prayed for clarity. I asked God to show me the truth, even if it shattered everything. The second time was beside Julianne's hospital bed, after she watched me nearly die from poison. Machines were beeping. Doctors were whispering, and I was begging for her safety. That prayer wasn't about dad revenge. It was about protection, wisdom, and strength to do what was right, even if it cost me everything. The third time was at dawn after her rescue from that warehouse. I stood alone, exhausted, grateful, and broken. I thanked God we were still alive. I thanked Him that my daughter was safe. I thanked Him that evil had not won. That is the heart of this family story. If you've followed other grandpa stories, you know something important: money attracts predators. But faith attracts warriors. Wealth doesn't create evil, but it reveals it. And if we are not careful, it can also reveal our weaknesses. I ignored my instincts at first. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself I was just a worried father. I doubted that someone could be so calculated, so patient, so cold. And that doubt nearly cost my daughter her life. Don't be like me. Don't wait until it's almost too late. When your gut speaks, listen. When something feels off, investigate. God sometimes speaks through strangers like Diana. Sometimes he speaks through unease you can't explain. Those instincts were given to you for a reason. In many grandpa stories, the lesson comes too late. The regret is permanent. I was fortunate. I got a second chance, and that second chance taught me something powerful. Real dad revenge isn't about destruction. It's about prevention. It's staying awake when everyone else says, relax. It's asking hard questions when everyone else is celebrating. It's protecting your family before the wolf gets inside your home, not after. That's the deeper message of this family story. Here's my honest reflection. Wealth is a mirror. It shows you who people really are and who you are when tested. Gavin saw money as opportunity. Vanessa saw money as escape. I saw money as responsibility. The real question isn't whether you have money. The question is whether you have wisdom. Whether you guard your family fiercely. Whether you verify before you trust. Whether you're willing to look like the overprotective one if it means keeping your loved ones safe. That's what so many meaningful grandpa stories try to teach us. If this family story touched you, if you've ever felt that quiet warning voice inside, share this story with someone who might need it. You never know who is ignoring red flags right now because they don't want conflict. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever ignored your instincts and later regretted it? Or did you act early and protect someone you love? Your experience could help someone reading this tonight. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about courage, vigilance, faith, and protection, subscribe and stay with me. These aren't just dramatic grandpa stories. They're reminders that love sometimes requires strength, that protection sometimes requires strategy, that faith sometimes requires action. One final note. Some upcoming stories will include fictional elements crafted for reflection and educational value. Details may be adjusted to highlight the lesson. If this content doesn't resonate with you, I respect that. There are many paths to wisdom. But if you're ready for more family story journeys about resilience, protection, and the power of standing firm when evil shows its face, I'll be here. Stay vigilant, stay faithful, stay protected.